Hello. How's everyone doing? All right. Um, I'm uh, I'm streaming on the internet again. Yay. What shall we talk about? Well, maybe I should introduce myself first. Um, I don't try to be overly professional about this. But I'm Mike Brock. Hi. I write for Substack, Notes from the Circus, where I give you my observations about the world through my philosophical lens. And I like to do these live streams sometimes to share with you my thoughts in real time. When I first started doing these, I put a lot of thought into them, and I took a lot of notes and figured out what I wanted to talk about ahead of time. Now I've sort of realized it's more therapeutic for me to just like show up for these things without any plan. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about, but there are a lot of things to talk about, right? I mean, the Epstein schism in the the MAGA camp and also the broader public conversation is certainly a fascinating thing that we can explore. I think through the ethics of it, the psychology of it, what it says about the nature of power and politics. Lots of fun directions we can go. Um, and the cool thing is this is my show, and I get to talk to you about whatever I want to talk about. And if you want to listen, you can listen. And if you don't, there's other Substack lives going on. But I have a lot of thoughts, and as I'm deciding in real time what to talk to you about, I'm reminded of like how overwhelming all this is, right? We don't I don't think we spend a lot of time like kind of engaged in the meta conversation uh about the sort of the nature of our public discourse today and how complicated the world is and the amount of variables that we're all having to kind of keep in our head to sort of make sense of the world, right? How does um if you're a parent, you think about politics and in terms of the lens of your children and what they're going to need in the world and your friends and your community and the variables we have to keep in our head today are just well beyond the capacity of any human being to truly make sense of on their own. With all the, I mean, we've made the world complicated. We've basically turned our world into a very very sophisticated Rube Goldberg machine, in some sense, to be humorous about it, as we should, right? We should laugh at the absurdity of our situation as serious as it is, because, right, we're humans and we have a right to feel joy. So I jest on that. The complexity of the modern world, which is, by the way, and in some ways the central affliction of like why we're here, why we're struggling, why we're all struggling to make sense of what's going on. Like why can't my neighbor see that Donald Trump is like obviously one of Jeffrey Epstein's good friends and probably knew what was going on, and like it's like fucking obvious to anyone who's paying attention. Did you not like remember the Access Hollywood tapes with Billy Bush? Grab him by the pussy. I mean, is it not obvious to you? Well, it's not obvious to them, apparently. In this complex world, this world of information overload and distraction, um, where many of us, the thing that I might ask you to sort of take stock of, if you're asking yourself, why can't my MAGA family member or friend, see what is so obvious to me? Recognize that you're probably here listening to me, talk to you because you're struggling to make sense of the world as well, right? Um, Now, I might suggest if you're listening to me, you're more in touch with reality than your mega friend. But what I'm trying to show you here by walking you through these thoughts in this way is the nature of our epistemic condition, the structure of confusion in our public life. Um, and it's something that I mean, it's the thing that like I am most worried about, right? As a technologist, as a sort of like, you know, like uh, shoot from the hip, like public philosopher, making it up as I go along, guy. Um, Take it or leave it. Uh, Like our capacity to survive as a civilization is really predicated on things, ultimately epistemic questions, right? About like what can, like, our knowledge of the world, the dangers of the world, and the all, many of those dangers that we ourselves are creating in terms of the technology that should serve us but can also enslave us and endanger us. Um, our ability to survive as a species will ultimately come down to whether or not we can organize all that information in such a way that we can collectively identify threats and opportunities in a clear way, and then build policies and institutions around, moving towards those opportunities and away from those threats. And that's very abstract and very sort of like heady way to put it, but I think that is like literally true. Um, and so we live in an information age. Our world is run by information. That, I mean, we can kind of debate if that was like always true of human civilization, right? Like, in some sense, there's a whole field of science, information theory and complexity theory, where you can kind of try to generalize these things to the extreme. But, you know, we have built a world, a mechanized world that runs on information. Increasingly, and we have self-driving cars, right? We have Waymo self-driving taxis here in Los Angeles. Um, the Teslas can drive themselves, like, and other manufacturers are bringing on similar technologies. So information runs the world, and we're, that sort of opens the sort of the conversational window to talking about artificial intelligence and autonomous machines and the sorts of scary things that we can dream about there. I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee. But once again, right? I mean, trying to think about these things and understand the nature of the problems and understand or at least come to some understanding or theory of what we ought to do in face of these opportunities and challenges is an epistemic problem, and we are in an epistemic crisis. We don't agree on what the world looks like at all. Um, and not just like between the left and the right. Um, that's not the only fissure, not the only point of cleavage in our social epistemology. It exists even between you and me. Some people listening to me right now who greatly respect me, and like listening to me, um, see the world differently than I do in way in ways that we might get very upset at each other about, if that ever became the sort of the main topic of debate. That's not something I think we can ever escape, right, in the human condition, because ultimately, right, like, we experience the world through our senses. We move through the world, with our eyes and our ears, and or through other means for people who are seeing impaired or hearing impaired, um, through our through our ingenious systems of writing, uh, and in the case of, I guess, for blind and deaf individuals, like, the tactile communication, braille. I mean, just thinking about these things, right? I mean, like, there's like, how beautiful is it that as a species that we developed a way for people who are deaf and blind to be able to enjoy the beauty of knowledge, and sort of the shared human experience through the writing. That we developed a system like braille, like, that to me is an example. It's like proof that, like, love exists in the human condition. um and it's like and it's something that, you know I base, like, a lot of my faith in the liberal notion, or the liberal ethic and view of the world, is that humans don't like to see other human beings suffering needlessly. Like, even if sometimes we like to imagine it, we like to imagine seeing other people hurt. When we actually see those people get hurt and we see the tears in their eyes, it often softens people. We're seeing this happen now with the deportations, right? Support for Trump's deportations are plummeting in the polls. Um, and a lot of the people that were cheering on these deportations have gone silent, because when they start to see these videos on TikTok and on social media of children crying, and seeing people just, like, absolutely, you know terrorized, that touches something in the human condition, right? That, and that's why people are recoiling. There's something fundamental there in all of us. We don't like to see other people suffering, even if we like to imagine it. Even if we like to imagine it. And by the way, like, this was true even in Nazi Germany. I mean, and I suggest that people, if you haven't read, all of the work of Hannah Arendt, who I reference a lot, um, you come to recognize that, like, one of the things that the Nazis kind of had to do in order to carry out the Holocaust was to find ways of like uh, of distancing the German bureaucracy and all the people who worked in government from, like, the up close true horrors of what was happening at the camps. That's why the camps were set up in extra legal jurisdictions, even within the dictatorship of Nazi Germany, because if the average if that average person, that average clerk in some German part of the government were to see with their own eyes, the pupils of the eyes of those, like, Jewish, you know families that were being sent into the gas chambers. There's no way that it would have continued, right? Like, this is like, dehumanization occurs by basically making things out of sight and out of mind, because there is something in us that does not like to see suffering, and when we do, it moves us. And you felt this if you're listening to my voice. I know that, like, unless you're, if you're, sociopaths are obviously the exception to the rule here. But if you're not a sociopath, you know what I'm talking about. Like, have you ever lost your temper with somebody and just like really wanted that person to hurt because they hurt you? And then you do something to hurt them, you say something to hurt them, and then like you feel, and then when the change happens in their facial expressions, and they become teary-eyed, suddenly you feel like an awful person. Like that that there that is there's there that is something essential to the human condition. That, like, we're not meant to hurt each other. We confuse ourselves into hurting each other by, like, distracting ourselves with things that ultimately don't redound to sort of human flourishing and the good life. And that's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against that chaos that gets in the way of that sort of fundamental love. And so that's like why I sort of view, I have this, I've written about this when I was writing a lot more philosophical stuff months ago, and now I feel like I'm just writing about political stuff. Um, but when I say like love is an epistemic force, I'm sort of identifying that feature, that sort of, indescribable thing, that desire in us, um, to reach out and have consciousness touch consciousness, and to actually care when we see suffering there, and then attach that back to sort of the ways that we construct meaning about the world, and the words we use, and the concepts we build, and technologies that we innovate. And why do we do those things? Do we build MRI? We built. Why do we build MRI machines, magnetic resonance imaging? Um, because of love. Because it's like we don't want our loved ones to die of cancer. We want to find those tumors and get them out, right? That's an example where we built a piece of technology, a piece of medical diagnostic technology to find disease in the body. Um, that's what technology is for. It's not clear to me what the internet is for yet. I'm not saying that the internet's bad, but I'm gonna say something kind of provocative here, and I say this as somebody who was like an internet, my entire career has been built around the internet. Um, but it's not clear what the internet's for, if you ask me. Um, in the same way that what an MRI machine is for. Um, the internet has connected us. It's connecting me to you now. And yet we're the most, in some ways, people who research this, I'm not I'm not a sociologist or an anthropologist, but I read about, I read people who are worried about things like this loneliness epidemic that we have, this sex recession that's occurring in young people, and it's very clear to me that we're increasingly living our entire social lives through screens that we hold in our hands. And we all know this. We all complain about this. We try to keep our kids off these devices, for as much as we can, to get them to sort of see that there is a reality that they exist within. but the pull towards that screen is increasing, not just through because of addiction, but through necessity. It's increasingly how we live, right? It's how we do business, how we get stuff. Like, increasingly, if you get tickets to an event now, it's a QR code on your phone or so we've built the internet into sort of our culture in such a way that it's impossible to now see a world without it. But we sit now at this precipice worrying, is it going to consume us? Is are the people who control the flow of that information from, on our screens going to control us and dominate us and enslave us? These are the real serious existential questions of our time. Um, and they are the questions that are there, regardless of Trump and Vance and Musk and Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. Uh, these are the very serious questions that we should have been asking quite some time ago. Some people were, most of us weren't. I wasn't. I want to, like the last year of my life, I think has been um, a difficult adjustment for me in terms of like how I sort of perceive reality, because I do come from that sort of Silicon Valley world where I saw this technology, the sort of the app economy, the rise of digital currency as these sort of obvious goods for the world. And I do want to say that, like, I don't think it's as simple as saying they're not good for the world, in the sense that, you know, to the extent that technology has been alleviating poverty around the world, and it is, right? Like, I mean, our technological progress, the ability to use the internet to educate and make information available, has is actually helping, like, bring millions of people out of poverty around the world. And so it is pulling people up. But then there's this paradox on the other side, where once you get past the sort of like basic step of sort of being in abject poverty and then sort of moving up the ladder into something that looks like a stable middle class life, you then have to sort of like look at, like, well, what is the nature of this world that we're living in, what is the sphere, what's the psychological and social landscape of the modern day middle class life. And it's TikTok and, and YouTube, um, and and Uber. And so, and we see, like, we see the mental health crisis that in young children, right? Like, suicide rates are rising um, among young kids. And I think we have to admit to ourselves that um, the it, it's not obvious. This is not obviously, like, healthy for human beings, to say the least. We're embodied beings, right? Um, I think one of the big philosophical mistakes I think people make when they think about what it means to be a human. You might think of yourself. You think of your consciousness maybe as the sort of thing that sits right behind your eyes. Consciousness is looking out from behind your eyes. Um, and You might think of it, if you're sort of an engineering type minded person, you might think of it as like sort of ultimately just a information processing system. That's what consciousness is, and that's what AI is, and everything around that sort of ball of like consciousness, of this sort of whatever this like coherent information processing entity is. And I'm not saying that's how I view it. Like, I have a nuanced view. I can talk about my view of consciousness in some future conversation. I'm just trying to describe how I think a lot of people think about it. And they think that, you know, the world around that conscious experience is just a set of rational problems to be solved with logic and science. Um, and that there's the thing that and the thing that needs to be done is to efficiency maximize the conversion of, you know, like raw materials into stuff that like our minds desire. And I think, that's like the way that like Elon Musk like views the world, right? It's very inhuman way um to think about the world. I think a healthier way to think about, where you are in the universe, and this place that even right now, is you're an embodied being. You're not just your mind, you're also your body. You're in the world. You're walking around in the real world. You're sleeping in a bed. You're somewhere right now. Um, and that's not like semantic. That's not incidental. It's fundamental. I mean, your consciousness emerges from this assemblage of you, right? Carl Sagan said that, our consciousness is how the universe has come to know itself. It's a very, very, those who've read me know that I really like sort of looking at those things in sort of a Spinozan frame. But I think we need to find a way back to that recognition. We need, I don't know how we get back to a more humane culture that's really focused on the human experience. We're not focused on the human experience. We're focused on the scrolling experience and the liking experience um and the buying experience and the transactional experience, which all serve, you know, uh, a whole set of material concerns that I think we all agree at like the end of the day are like not the most important things to us. But that's like the challenge. That's a challenge. That's the challenge. Um, and I think everyone. I don't. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think even people on the right, right? People who disagree with me most, right, are also just like searching for that. But I think they're very confused about how to get that. They think the way they're going to get that is by removing people like me from the world. Um, the real, but they're, but the reality being that they've been. I mean, this is sad. I mean, this is going to sound bad, but I happen to think this is true. MAGA is pathetic. Not in a I wanna mean what I wanna be very, uh, specific about what I mean when I say MAGA is pathetic. Um, I actually mean that in an empathetic way. I don't mean that in an insulting way. Like, the path the pathos of the situation needs to be, like, let's think of it this way. This is the when I look at MAGA, this is what I see. I see people that I know, some people I love who have been captured by this. Um, their fears and their desires, and their, wounded memories have been weaponized and used against them by a set of business interests, like say Rupert Murdoch and Fox News and Newsmax and Rush Limbaugh, um, that took advantage of these people and convinced them that what they needed to do was to stand behind people who would go to Washington and attack their cultural enemies, people like me, but whose real goal was to, you know, destroy the government and transfer political power from democratic control to private control to business elites. And that was and that's actually like what's going on, right? Like MAGA, when people hate, like, I I don't like insult like MAGA supporters like others do. Like, I'm obviously very harsh against anyone who's like sort of like like a MAGA politician or a MAGA influencer. I attack those people ruthlessly, and I don't really show them any empathy, but because like I recognize that those people know what they're doing. They know they're weaponizing people. They know they're lying. Like Benny Johnson knows he's lying, and he doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't give a fuck. Um, he's willing to say whatever he can for a buck, basically. He's found his little niche in existence where he can make millions and millions of dollars, um, convincing uh, people who don't know any better, quite frankly, to vote for someone like Donald Trump. So Donald Trump will basically allow them to enrich themselves by, tearing apart our collective inheritance, right? Which is the republic that we love. Like that is why MAGA's pathetic. It's eh, you know it's very hard, right, to sort of like hold all that in your head and then kind of like think to yourself, well, what should I do? What should we do about that? But as I said at the very beginning, right, like we live in a very complex world, and it's very very hard to make sense of it. So I think that, what I think we need to do, right? I mean, because I don't want to just leave you guys with unsolvable problems because everyone gets mad at me when I do that. Um, Look, I mean, people need someone to trust, and people don't know who to trust, and a lot Americans have a lot of good reasons to not trust right now. Um, and I think the only way that that trust is going to be rebuilt in this country, um, is well, I mean, first of all, there's just needs to be a generational change, right, in political leadership. Um, the current, I mean, look, I I've been kind of like I do think you need political establishments, by the way, like that can kind of act as moderating influences on political parties. Um, but in this current environment, I would say that um, the establishment, such as it is, the liberal establishment, needs to be swept aside right now, and there needs to be um, younger younger blood that comes in to form a new, fresh political coalition. And that person, and honestly, one of the reasons why I think a younger person will be trusted more is that they have less. Younger people, by definition, have less entanglements than older people, right? Um, like even someone like me, or like I'm like I'm middle aged now, right? The older I get, right? Even I've had I have lots of relationships, and people could look at those relationships and go, "That doesn't make sense. Why was Mike friends with that guy? He said this and that." And it's like, um, younger people, younger politicians have less of those problems because they've had less time to make moral compromises. So I do think that um, the time, one of the ways out of this crisis of trust is going to be um, a sort of a generational handoff to a younger generation, that is in more digitally native, understands uh, the nature of the epistemic condition better than older people do because they grew up in this sort of digitally native way. They know what's making them unhappy. They know that they're lonely. They understand better why they're lonely. Actually, when you listen to young people, when you listen to teenagers and people in their 20s like talk about like what it is today, it's pretty fascinating. You should do this. These kids like actually have a pretty good understanding of like why their world is fucked up. Um and and so I think younger leaders is like one of the biggest cheat codes that we have right now, towards building one, an effective opposition, and two, trying to find like policies that will actually start dealing with the crises that are in front of us. Um, so like, I mean, I think it's great to see someone like Mom Donnie and New York City, like being able to inspire people. Look, I'm not a socialist. I'm not a socialist. I think some of the things he's said are I don't think they'll work. I don't think they'll a bit. But on the other hand, right? I think that he seems reasonable. He seems like he might learn. He'll figure. He seems open. He's actually been pretty open to meeting with establishment figures and try to meet people halfway, and that's good. That's good. He's coming up and he's questioning all of these things. He's questioning people like me who think that, like, I think a market economy is the only reasonable way to operate a an economy at scale. But he also sees the failures of that market economy, and he wants to force some tough conversations that we should have. So I look at Mamdani that way. Um, and that will sort of like horrify, like, establishment liberals. Um, Whereas I can say, look, like I don't think government run grocery stores is like a good use of like his time. I think if he's like really, and I've heard all this like conversations about like food deserts and stuff like that, but like I I I I think he is right to care about income inequality. I think he is right to care about poverty. I think he is right to care about the concentration of wealth. But I think that uh, there are other ways that we could go about that, right? Like I think that like I think we should have really high estate taxes at this point. I don't think we should be allowing billionaires to pass on billions of dollars of wealth to generate to these sort of multi-generational uh like dynasties that turn into political dynasties. I think we need to like just like I mean, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I probably would have been against that. Now that I've seen the kind of consequences of this, like up close and personal, it's like, nah, fuck this. We need to like take people's money away after they die, at the very least. And then and I think we have to have a serious conversation, right, about taxes in this country. I think the wealthy need to pay more. I think we have to broaden the tax base in this country as well, and build up state capacity. Um, like like you should your ability to survive cancer should not be based on whether or not you are gainfully employed um in this country. Like we need to fucking make that problem go away. Like so I mean like and I think that a generational shift in our politics towards, politicians who are in their 30s and 40s is desperately what the Democrats need to let happen now. I mean, Chuck Schumer needs to like get the fuck out of there, and hand the baton to somebody who's younger, because these people understand the cultural problems, the political and economic and cultural problems better than like people in their fucking 60s and 70s. They'll never be able to understand it because they simply have not grown up in the epistemic environment that these younger generations have. Um, and so that's kind of made me kind of glad that you're seeing someone like Mamdani, like regardless of his politics, whether he's like a centrist or a socialist, that younger energy, I think, is the key to saving our democracy. Um, and so I'm here for it, and I hope we see more younger politicians like that popping up, especially in local politics as well. That I think is that's a position that I've come to. I mean, I know there's always going to be the counter argument that like older people are wiser. That's true. You know what? I think we should have older judges. Like I think there's like certain kinds of like, if I'm just gonna like go, I didn't have a plan on what I'm talking about, but I think there's like certain like kinds of jobs where I think the older you are, like you're probably like better. I think judges is an example of that. Like I'd much rather like, like be before a judge in their like 60s than one in their like 30s. I'd rather like somebody who was just like completely like, institutionalized um and so I think that those are I think though I think that's an example of that. But for politicians like members of Congress, no, I think we need younger people, and younger, maybe a president in their 50s, not in their fucking 70s. Um, because I mean, I think there's a real challenge, I think, to having a, a president. I mean, maybe I'm open to it. But I definitely think that we need to start thinking more generationally right now. One of the reasons why our institutions cannot react to the epistemic condition of our time is our institutions are run by people who do not live in the dread, the the depths of that epistemic condition, which are our youth, um, young adults, um, and those people need to be elevated in these institutions such that these institutions can learn about like what it means to like live like that, so they can see these problems, they can feel these pains, and we can start thinking about like policies and cultural responses to these challenges. So yeah, the gerontocracy needs to go. That much is for sure. Anyways, um how long have I been talking? I've been talking about almost an hour now. That's my yeah. That that's been a. I mean this has been, I guess, uh, a fun little adventure. Like I said at the beginning of this, I didn't know what I was going to talk about, where it was going to end up. We we went down like a lot of different rabbit holes there. So we kind of, we move from domain to domain, and we sort of weave things together, in a multidisciplinary way today, which is fun. It's fun. Uh, it's good. It's good to sort of take the opportunity to sort of move things back to first principles, as opposed to sort of just like reacting to everything. And instead, let's respond to our world in a thoughtful way. And hopefully I helped you a little bit with that today. I certainly helped myself. This is, I'm with you're talking to you is an opportunity for me to sort through my thoughts and figure and make some connections in my head that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise made if I didn't have an excuse to sit here and just like talk into a microphone for an hour. So maybe we both get something out of this. So thank you everybody for joining me on this beautiful Sunday, and we'll do it again. Thank you.